Let's dive into a really powerful idea. What if your reality is nothing more than an arrangement of your own mind? And if that's true, it means you have the power to completely change your world just by rearranging your thoughts, without changing the core of who you are.
Okay, think about it like this. You take two pieces of steel. They're made of the exact same stuff. In one piece, the molecules are all scattered and jumbled up. It's just a lump of metal. But in the other piece, you align those very same molecules in a coherent direction, and suddenly it becomes a powerful magnet. Nothing was added or taken away. The only thing that changed was the internal arrangement.
Well, the exact same principle applies to us. It's not that some people are born with a rich mind and others with a poor mind. We all have the same fundamental substance, the same consciousness. The only difference between someone who is successful and someone who is struggling is the arrangement of their mind. It's the concept they hold of themselves.
So, if we all have this power, why isn't everyone living the life of their dreams? Well, an ancient text, the Book of James, actually gives us a clue. It points out this crucial difference between two types of people, the one who simply hears an idea and the one who actually does something about it.
This metaphor is it's perfect. The hearer is all of us when we get that flash of inspiration. You look in the mirror and for a second, you see who you could be. You see your potential. But then you turn away. You get distracted by life and poof, you immediately forget that powerful image and go right back to being the same old you. And this really breaks down the two paths, doesn't it? The hearer, they're passive. They look in the mirror and then they forget. They basically end up fooling themselves. But the doer, they are active. They don't just glance in a mirror, they look into what's called the law of liberty. And here's the most important part. They persevere. They hold on to that new version of themselves until it becomes real.
Let's make this real. I want to share an absolutely stunning story about how this works even under the most impossible circumstances. It's the story of a lecturer named Neville Goddard who found himself drafted into the U.S. Army at the height of World War II and decided to put this principle to the ultimate test.
So let's walk through what happened. He gets drafted at 38 years old, hates it. He applies for a discharge, but his application comes back stamped with a huge, final-looking disapproved. From the outside, it's game over. The Army has spoken. But that very night, he decided to stop being a hearer and start being a doer.
And this right here, this is the turning point. He didn't fight it. He didn't argue or complain. He said, okay, that's the decision of Caesar, the outside world, the facts. But then he turned his attention inward, to the law of liberty, a place where the only authority was him.
So that night, lying in a noisy Army barracks in Louisiana, he didn't actually sleep there in his mind. He fell asleep in his own apartment in New York City, 1,000 miles away. And he didn't just kind of think about it, no, he constructed the whole thing. He imagined the feeling of his wife sleeping next to him. He saw his baby daughter in her little crib. He mentally reached out and touched the familiar furniture in his own room. He was there. And then, in the middle of the night, around 4 a.m., something incredible happened. He had this inner vision of a hand scratching out the word disapproved on his papers and writing in approved. And a voice told him, "That which I have done, do nothing." The inner act was complete. He had successfully rearranged his mind.
For the next 9 days, he walked around that army base with a secret. On the outside, he was a soldier, but on the inside, he knew he was a civilian. He just held on to that feeling. And then, believe it or not, the very same colonel who had stamped disapproved called him into his office, and, without any real explanation, he reversed his own decision. Neville was honorably discharged.
So how on earth do we do this? This wasn't just some random miracle, right? It was a demonstration of a law, a process, and we can actually break it down into 3 simple, practical steps.
So here's the method. First, you have to know exactly what you want. Be crystal clear. For Neville, it was being an honorably discharged civilian back in his New York apartment. Second, you have to assume the feeling of that wish already being a fact, not in the future, but right now. And third, and this is the big one, you have to persevere in that assumption. In that word, perseverance, that's everything. That is the entire game. It's not forgetting what you assumed. If you spend 5 minutes feeling wealthy, but then an hour later you're back to worrying about bills, you are the person who looked in the mirror and completely forgot what they saw. You slip back into being the hearer.
So okay, let's bring this home. How does this apply to you, right now? This isn't just for getting out of the Army. It works for everything. The biggest trap we fall into is arguing for our own limitations. The second you start explaining why your assumption can't possibly be true, you've lost. You're back to being a hearer.
Look, you might not be in a physical prison cell, but we are all, in a way, imprisoned by our current concept of ourselves. We live in a prison of, I don't have enough money, or a prison of, I'm always unhealthy, or I'll never find love. These things feel so real, but they are just mental arrangements, waiting for you to realign them.
And it all boils down to this one powerful truth. This is the law in its purest form. An assumption, even if it seems totally false to your senses, even if your logical mind is screaming, no way, if you persist in it, it will harden into fact. It has no other choice.
So I want to leave you with this. What prison are you living in right now? What limitations have you accepted as your reality? Knowing what you now know, knowing you have the power to simply rearrange your mind, what new reality will you dare to assume is true for you, starting tonight?